How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Chof Daf 28, Daf Koyach. Right, I think when we went up to like Yud Dal or Yud Ches or something, I think I said Koyach. I was like, oops, no, not yet. But now, today is Daf Koyach, and sure, is it an awesome Daf, friends? It's like a normal Daf. I think that possibly like on almost any other Masechta, this might technically be considered not like an easy daf, but friends, for where we're at and given the current circumstances, this is an easy daf, friends. I'm super excited. Like, didn't take long to prepare. You might be wondering, then why did I get it out late? Well, because I was learning other things all day yesterday, because whatever, I'm behind on everything. And anyways, I only got to basically learning this daf at like midnight this morning, but it like moved. Like I wasn't stressed about it because it like moved, and I'm hoping we're getting into basically with this. We're starting to get into like tefillin and tzitzis sugyas. A, they're just exciting, and B, I hopefully they're like not like super ridiculously hard, and I'm feeling good that I'll be able to get that day ahead again and be able to hopefully this time get on find my footing before running into a brick wall like happened last time. So I'm feeling really good, friends. I'm feeling really good. On today's daf, we wrap up the sprinkling the metzorah oil shelo lishmah. That's just a few lines. Honestly, I would have normally done it with yesterday's daf, but yesterday's daf I recorded on Friday right before Shabbos, and I wasn't able to chaperine. So we're going to wrap that up. That should only take a few minutes. And then we get into a new Mishnah where we discuss more things that are kind of required, like we were talking before about the 4 lachmei toda. You have to have all 4 of them, and you have to have all the 4 all the 7 sprinklings of the metzorah and whatever, like all that stuff that you have to do all of them. So we're going to do more of those things, but those things are now becoming like the 4 parshas in tefillin, the 2 parshas in the mezuzah, the 4 tzitzis. So like we're starting to get into some interesting, some more kind of nogea lamaisa sugas, which is like, wow, so exciting. This is why, by the way, if you don't know, that's why in Brisk, as far as I'm aware, this is the pshat, that in Brisk, they only learned kachim. Can you imagine, Chevra? Imagine learning in Brisk, and all you ever learned was like zvachim and menachos. I don't know what else they learn over there. Me'ilah, I don't know. But all they learn is kachim because they want it to be lishmah. They want it to be Torah lishmah. Everything else is lamaise, right? Nashim, nezikin, moed, brachas. Everything else is lamaise. They want to learn lishmah. Can you imagine? Like, it's so now we get to like do they skip these sugyas? In Brisk, I wonder. In Brisk, do they like skip the like tefillin sugyas and stuff? I wonder. Anyways, but yeah, it's super intense. So finally we get something that's like nogea lemaisa. It's like, wow, remember that? So it's exciting stuff. Additionally, okay, so we're going to discuss the requirements for the construction of the menorah. And additionally, at the end, we're going to discuss the architecture of the menorah. Now, of the menorah, friends. This week's parsha is Parshas Mishpatim. Next week's parsha is Parshas Truma. Truma is where the architecture of the menorah is discussed. Now, Truma is a difficult. If you do Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum with Rashi, it's very difficult, Truma, because it talks about the kelim of the Mishkan, the Aron, the Shulchan, the menorah, and it's very technical. It's very detailed. But friends, even if you don't do Shnai Mikra, then you might just not know what's going on anyways. But because it's complicated, it's difficult. But if you pay attention and follow along with me, I have slides on today's daf. If you follow along on today's daf, with me, and you understand today's daf, it's going to help you next Shabbos. Comes Parshas Truma, you'll have a better idea of what's going on during Kriyas HaTorah or during Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum. You'll be able to move faster through those Rashis. So friends, exciting daf ahead of us. Let's jump in. Friends, we begin on Daf Chof Ches, Omid Aleph, second line of the Daf. Omar Mar, we had said earlier on yesterday, we had said V'shabafnim, V'shabametzorah, Shelo Lishman. It's funny, I was thinking earlier when I was reviewing this Daf, I don't know if this is a right ha'ara or not, but it's funny because there's like a little bit of what's it called, of a binary kind of situation on this Daf, in that this section that we're doing now is still like from yesterday, kind of like metzorah and chatos apnimios, and then we get up to the menorah stuff. I don't know. I was wondering if maybe what makes kachim so hard is that it's kind of jumping like from topic to topic. It's not like linear. It's like fragmented. Like, I don't know, it's just like all these things. It's like the chatos opnimios and the metzorah, and you have to be thinking about, right, so the metzorah has the sprinkling of the oil among a million other things, and you have the chatos opnimios that has the sprinkling of the blood among other things, and there's kavana, and there's lishmah. There's like so many fragmented things that you have to think about all at once. Whereas I think a lot of other Gemaras is like maybe like one concept that you're kind of working through, and it's more like linear, so you can kind of like focus on one thing as opposed to 100 things. But anyways, so I'm saying this because right now we're still from like yesterday. So Amar Mar Shebifnim. So you have what's Bifnim? Chatos Apnimios. B'Sheb Metzorah, the sprinkling of the oil of the metzorah. Shalol lishman psulos. We had said yesterday if they are sprinkled, whether the blood of the there's so many details, right? So like whether the blood of the chatos apnimios, whether the oil of the metzorah. So if they are sprinkled shalol lishman psulos, shalom mechuvanos, but not in the right direction, ksheris. But we learn in the Brisa, bein shalom lishman, bein shalom mechuvanos, whether they are not for lishma, or whether they are not in the right direction, sprinkled in the right direction, ksheris, they are nonetheless ksheris. Right, the right direction being towards, let's say we're talking about by the chatos apnimios, right? That's also right. But what are we talking about? Chatos apnimios, it could be the sprinkling towards the parochas in the heichel, it could be sprinkling towards the aron in the kodesh HaKodashim, and then you have the metzorah who's actually not in either of them. Technically, he's standing at the Shar Nicanor and he sticks in his head in his bahonis. But the Kohen, I imagine, is in the Azara and he's springing towards the Heichel, right? So it's all right. So I guess Chatos Apnimios, if we're talking about a Yom Kippur, so it's in the Kodesh HaKodashim towards the Aron. Also on Yom Kippur, or by Parlam Davash Tzibur, or by Parkor Mashiach, we're talking about, or by the Siri of the Zara, we're talking about in the Heichel, sprinkling towards the Paroches in the Heichel. If we're talking about the metzorah, we're talking about in the Azara towards the Heichel. So when it comes to kachim, everything takes so long because there's like 1,000 details for everything. And I guess maybe in the rest of Shas, it's just more like you're on one sugar, you can just move, Anyways, fun. So there's just always so much that just needs to be talked out. Okay, aside from my babbling. Okay, so basically, on the one hand, yesterday we said that the sprinkling shalol lishma is puzzle, whereas we have a brayso that says that the sprinkling shalol lishma is nonetheless kshera. So Amar Rav Yosef lo kasha. So Rav Yosef has an interesting suggestion. Harab Eliezer v'harab Banon. Interesting. So Rav Yosef wants to argue that this is a machlokes between Rav Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rav Eliezer, as we know from early on in Masechta Zvachim, demakish osham lechatos, that the pasuk says, "Kachatas ka'asham." What's the pasuk? Kachatas ka'asham Torah achas loim akoyin asher yichaper bo lo yiyeh. So we compare chatas and osham, just like according to Rabbi Eliezer, just like a chatas needs to be lishma, and osham also needs to be lishma. And also we have a pasuk by metzorah where it says, "V'imdalu v'nyadu maseges v'log keves echad osham," and at the end of that pasuk it says, "V'log shaman." So basically we have a connection between chatas and osham. We have a connection between osham metzorah and the log shemen of the metzorah. And therefore, according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says that just like a chatas, in osham also needs to be lishma. So just like in osham, the log of oil needs to also be lishma. And therefore, yesterday when we say that shalol lishma is possible, it's Rabbi Eliezer. Again, I'm Rav Yosef Lakasha or Rabbi Eliezer of Araban. Rabbi Eliezer, demakish osham lechatas. Rabbi Eliezer, who juxtaposes the korban oshams to korban chatases, and just like korban chatas needs to be lishma, so too a korban osham, and makish nami log osham, and the log shemen shal metzorah is also compared to the osham of the metzorah, and therefore just like the osham of the metzorah needs to be lishma, so too the log shemen. And therefore yesterday when we said that by the sprinkling of the metzorah, shelo lishma is psula, it's like Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbanon lemakshe, whereas the Rabbanon do not have that hekesh, and the rabbis don't compare asham to chatas in that way and say that ashams need to be lishmah, and therefore there's no lishmah requirement by the log shemen either. Or the Rebbe Eliezer, but wait a second, Rebbe Eliezer, we of course have a principle. We have a principle that specifically when it comes to kachim, Dover Alamed, right? We do not say Dover Alamed behekesh choser melamed behekesh. That something that's learned via hekesh can teach something else by hekesh. Reb Neil, is this one of your sugyas? Reb Neil has some sugyas. There are certain sugyas in Shas that are Reb Neil's. When they come up, it's an opportunity for us to say hi to our friend Reb Neil. Obviously, the most famous of Reb Neil's sugyas is Nenev Zelu Choser, Kofin Amidas Stom. Reb Neil has some other sugyas. One of them that I always forget, maybe you can remind me, and this might possibly be the third one of Lamed min Alamed B'Kodshim. Anyways, hi Reb Neil, Shavua Tov, I hope you're doing good. Now, so by Kodshim, there's no concept of Lamed min Alamed. Meaning, we are learning out, how do we know that Log Shema needs to be the Shema according to Rebbe Eliezer? Well, it's learned out from Asham, because Asham needs to be the Shema. How do you know that Asham needs to be the Shema? Oh, well, that's learned out from Chatas, because Chatas needs to be the Shema. So, when it comes to Kachim, we don't do that, right? We won't say that the Log Shema needs to be the Shema since it's compared to Asham, which itself is compared to Chatas. By Kachim, we don't do that. And therefore, Rav Yosef's argument that the requirement for the Shema is Rabbi Eliezer, because he compares Asham to Chatas and then Log to Asham, that unfortunately is not going to work for us. Again, something that itself was learned out by a Hekesh, i.e. Asham, then going to be Melamed about the Log Shemen Be'Hekesh? No. Not, at least not by Kodshim. Rather says Rove, they're both the Rabbanon. Kan the Hachshir, kan the Haitzos, and the difference is, in terms, okay, so here's the thing. When we say it's possible, what it's saying is that the metzorah, unfortunately, is not Yotze, whatever it needs to be Yotze, is not allowed to be reintegrated into society. Right? It's not Miratze. I'm not sure why. It's unclear to me. I didn't see anywhere why there would be a requirement for lishmah for a metzorah. Meaning, I understand if we wanted to say like Rabbi Eliezer, we say we can't say like Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, fine, but like at least if we did say like Rabbi Eliezer, okay, I understand why, because the logos are not from the Asham, which is learned out from the Chatas. But we said we can't learn like Rabbi Eliezer. Well, then why do the Chachamim? Why would they say? Why then would there be a requirement of the Shema? Where does that come from? So I actually don't know the answer to that. But okay, apparently, if the oil was sprinkled shalol lishma, so it's not miratze, the metzorah cannot be reintegrated into society. However, it does make the shirayim, the shiyarei alog, the leftover oil that was not sprinkled, whatever is left over, can be enjoyed by the kohanim. It's kosher for them. So again, so it says, so Amar Rove, Havor Rabbanan, the both the rabbis kan lahachshir, that when we say kosher, it means that it's machshir, the shiyarei alog, to be enjoyed by the kohanim. Kan lahartzos, but in terms of we struggled to define maratza the other day. What did we say? Like affect appeasance or something like that. But it's not maratza in terms of the metzorah. Unfortunately, will have to try again before it can be reintegrated into society. So actually, interestingly, as I was saying that since the sprinkling was shalol lishma, so it's not maratza for the metzorah, and therefore he's unable to be reintegrated into society. There was something funny about that. Something sounded funny to me about that. And Rashi says that, right? That's what Rashi says. He says, "Lahater metzorah b'kahal," to allow the metzorah to be part of society, and because it won't be maratza, therefore he can't be part of society. But something felt a little funny because the metzorah, he's already tahor already a week ago. and he already went to the mikvah and I think shaved his clothes. I think shaved and everything. I think a week earlier went to the mikvah. I think washed his clothing. I think I'd have to look at the psukim. There's so many details when it comes to metzorah, but I think all that stuff might be true. Then a week later, there was again he went to the mikvah again. So the day before he was already at Tvul Yom. At that night he becomes a mechusar kippurim. So I would think at the end of the day, right now, what is he? He's a mechusar kippurim, so he won't be able to eat kodshim. But at this point, he's already been brought back into society a week ago. It says he stays michutz lamachane, outside of it, like michutz la'oel or something, michutz la'oelo sheva yomim or something. But I would think at this point he would be already be part of society. So Taka, there is a note in Rashi that says, "Ayin biyoma daf samach aleph sheperish Rashi latir lechol bekodshim." Oh, to allow him to eat kodshim. Right, that he's gonna have to do it over. He's gonna have to bring the oil again if he's gonna want to eat kodshim. V'chein kan chav zayin amud beis shelo lishmah perish gamken. Okay, interesting. So it's actually okay. Seems like it's actually not. It's tricky. Interesting. Rashi says on the one hand to be reintegrated into society. On the other hand, it sounds like it might just be about being a mechusar kippurim over here. So pretty interesting stuff. But okay, certainly if it was not lishmah, he's gonna have to do it over again, whether to be integrated into society or to be able to eat kodshim. It's a little bit unclear, I guess. Friends, we now get up to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Shiva knei menorah. Okay, ma'akmin zeh. The 7 branches of the menorah. I imagine we don't need a slide for that yet, right? I imagine we can all imagine a menorah that has 7 branches on it. The 7 branches of the menorah, like there was in the temple, like there was in the tabernacle. Ma'akvin zeh, you need all 7 of them. Shiva nerosel, the 7, I guess we think of candles, we think of neros as candles, but it means like the cups. At the top of the branches of the menorah, there were cups which would be filled with oil, and then there would be wicks put in them and lit. You need all of those neros. The 2 parshas in a mezuzah. Shema and V'hoya im Shamoya. Ma'akva zo, you need both parshas. Afilu kos ksav echod ma'akvin. And you need every single letter. Even one missing letter is a problem. I think that this is the main sugya in Shas about mezuzah, about tefillin, about tzitzis. I don't remember having like major sugyas about this anywhere else, right? So I think that this is where it is. So this is exciting stuff. I feel fun. Daled parshas tefillin, the 4 parshas in tefillin. Who can tell me what they are? Also Shema v'yom Shemoah. Additionally, Kadesh and Vaya ki Yiviacha. Those are at the end of Parshas Bo. Of course, there's the big machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, which we're not going to get to today. But that's the source for Rashi Tefillin or Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin, also in the days ahead. You need all 4 parshas, afilu ksav echad ma'akvan, and you need every letter. Even one missing letter is going to be trouble. Daled tzitzias makvos zo, right? 4 tzitzias, right? If you have daled kamfis, you have a garment with 4 corners. You got to put tzitzis on all 4 corners, and you need all 4 in order to be able to the mitzvah tzitzis. You need all 4. Rabbi Shmuel says, Rabbi Shmuel, Arba mitzvahs, each one is its own separate mitzvah. Interesting. Okay, so I guess you could. Okay, I guess according to the first way, if you're missing one of the, it's hard for me to define. I guess it's like the grouping, because on each corner there's like 8 strings, right? But I guess all those 8 strings together are what's being referred to as one instance of tzitzis. So according to the first way, all 4 instances, you need all 4 tzitzis string tying together instances. You need all 4 instances in order to be yotzei mitzvah of tzitzis. It sounds like according to Rabbi Shmuel, you could be yotzei individual mitzvahs of tzitzis, but not all 4 of them. It says the Gemara, my time, how come all of the branches of the menorah are me'akiv? Ksiv havoya ksivu, because it says havoya. What does it say? Kaftorim uknosa mimeno yihu. Okay, So Havaya, it has to be just so. You need all 7 branches. Tan Rabbana, the rabbis taught, Menorah oisa ba min eshes umin azov, that the menorah came from one block. The menorah was one block. It was one solid block of gold, and they would take, I guess, hammers and chisels and things, and they would knock away at it, and the menorah would emerge from a single block of gold. So I said, Eshes was from one block, umin azov, and of gold. Asa min agrutaos psula. If you make the menorah from golden shtiklach, specifically golden shtiklach, right? Let's go by for a second. Mishar mine matechos ksher, but you can use other metals, right? So the menorah does not need to be made out of gold. Does not need to be made out of gold. It's preferable. Now, if the menorah is being made out of gold, then it must be one block. It can't be made out of golden shtiklach that you weld together. If the menorah is not being made of gold, it can be made of shtiklach. Ma'ishna min agrutos psula. How can we say golden shtiklach are psulas? Dichsiv miksha, because it says miksha. It's got to come from one, it's got to emerge from a block. Rashi says, I think that miksha means emerging. He also, though, quotes a pasuk from Daniel, which describes when Belshazzar took out the vessels that his father Nebuchadnezzar had pillaged from our holy temple in Jerusalem, and he decided that he was going to bring them out at his feast, and he was going to drink from those vessels. And then a hand appeared and started writing on the wall, and Belshazzar did not know what the hand was writing, and his knees started trembling and knocking one another. So therefore, that says there, da le da ve'arku, what is it, ve'arku ba something? Ve'arku base da le da nakshon. They were knocking, his knees were knocking against each other. So it means to knock and for the menorah to emerge from this block of gold. So again, Ma'ishna grutos psulas. So why are shtiklach, golden shtiklach psulas? The Chsiv, it says miksha ve'avoya. It says that it has to emerge, and it says havoya. It must be just so. Sharmine matechos nami zav ve'avoya. But for the Gemara, but I don't understand why the menorah can be made out of other metals, because after all, it also says in that same pasuk where it talks about miksha, it also says zav tor. So we also clearly then have zav tor and havaya, and it must be just so. So I will say it has to be made out of gold, and it has to be made from one block. Both of those things are musts. Omar kro, the pasuk says te'aseh, it shall be made. L'rabbis sharmini matechos, says it shall be made, however it shall be made, to include even the use of other metals. V'em l'rabbis grutos, but wait, maybe te'aseh, however it is made, even with shtiklach of gold. Lo sakadatech, nisht. The amiksha ksiva avoya, because when the pasuk says havoya, right, when it says v'asisa menorah zav tor miksha te'asa menorah yurecha v'kona kivya kavtor v'cha mimena yihyu. So because miksha is closer to yihyu, I think maybe the Gemara is about to say this in a second, because miksha is, yeah, okay, well, one second. So let's say the miksha ksiva, the amiksha ksiva avoya, fine. That when it says yihyu at the end of the pasuk, it is in reference to miksha, i.e., it must be knocked out of a block. Te'asa nami amiksha ksiv. Yeah, but it says, I mean, if you think of it, actually, it says v'asiza menorahs zav tor miksha te'ase. Literally, the next word after miksha is te'ase, which means however it is made. So I might think that however it is made, actually miksha is not ma'akev. Even shtiklach should be okay. Ksiv miksha le'akev. Yeah, but it says by the menorah miksha twice. Right? It says in Shmos Perek Chafei, Pasuk Lamed Aleph, it says miksha te'asa menorah, and then 5 psukim later in Pasuk Lamed Vav, it says Kaftorei muknos mimena yu kula miksha achazav tor. Because it says miksha, twice, so it must be miksha. Zav nami lakiv. Yeah, but in those same places where it says miksha, it also says zav tar. So I might think that it has to be made out of zav. Hi, my. Look, things are hunky-dory and make sense if we say that shtiklach are psula, golden shtiklach are psulas, but other types of metal are ksheris. Hainu zav miksha l'drasha, because that's the drasha of zav miksha, which we will see in a minute. Eli omar mina grutos kshera mishar mina matechos psula. But if you say punkt fakert, that you can construct the menorah of golden shtiklach, but they must be gold, you can't use other metals. Zav miksha my darshas beit. Then what do you learn from zav miksha my drasha? Nu, what's this zav miksha? The sign that we learn in a braisa, kikar zav tor yaise osa, that the pasuk says that the menorah is made out of kikar zav, a talent of gold. And we learn from that zav tar where kikar zav tar yaise osa as kol akelim eila, all of these vessels. I imagine it's probably referring to the aron, the shulchan, and the menorah. I guess that's probably what all these vessels are. But anyways, ba zav ba kikar. If we're making the menorah out of gold, well then it must be a talent of gold. A talent is like a certain weight of gold. It has to be that amount of gold. Eina ba zav, but if it's not being made out of gold, eina ba kikar, it doesn't need to be a talent of whatever you're making. So let's say silver, it does not need to be a talent of silver. So we already see in this brisa that it can be made out of other metals, right? We're learning out from zav, kikar zav, that only if it's made out of zav does it need to be a kikar, which is a talent. Otherwise, it doesn't need to be a talent. Givi'el, kaftorel, ufrachel. It's goblets, it's knobs, it's flowers. Ba'azav, ba'agvim, that's in the same pasuk. No, it's not in the same pasuk. Where's this pasuk? This is from pasuk Shmos. Okay. But again, it says zav tar in that pasuk. So, ba'azav, if the menorah is made out of gold, givim, goblets, kaftorim, knobs, ufrachim, flowers. You need these things. When the menorah is made out of gold, you need the goblets, knobs, and flowers. Eina ba'azav, if the menorah is not being made out of gold, eina ba'gvim, kaftorim, ufrachim, you don't need goblets, knobs, and flowers. Okay. So we see already that the menorah does not need to be made out of gold. It can be made out of other materials. And when it's made out of other metals, so then it doesn't need to be a talent. You don't need the goblets, knobs, and flowers. Should we see what the goblets, knobs, and flowers are all about? I have a slide over here with the menorah. I think that this menorah that we're looking at over here, it looks to me like it's the menorah from the old city. I think it's the menorah from the old city near the Reshit Genesis Center. Anyways, so the pink arrows are pointing to the flowers. I hope it's clear enough to see. This isn't like the menorah that they have like in the Art Scroll Rashi Chumash, for example, is a little bit different, particularly when it comes to the base of it. It's a little bit different, but it's good enough, I think, for us to use as an example. So the pink arrows, right? So there's a pink arrow on top and towards the bottom. Those are pointing to the flowers. The blue arrows are pointing to the knobs. Okay? There are, I believe, 11 knobs. We're going to learn about this plenty moving forward. So there are, I think, 11 knobs. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 7 on each of those things, plus another 4. Yeah? Yeah. Anyways, those knobs are like those knob-looking things that the blue arrows are pointing to. And there's the goblets. The white arrows are pointing to the goblets. There are, I think, 22 goblets, because at the white arrow at the top of each of the branches, there are actually 3 goblets per branch there. So it's 6 times 3 is already 18. And then you have some more goblets it's really 7 times 3 because each of the 7 branches. So that's 21 goblets. And then, anyways, there's also the white arrow down below. So that is the menorah, and those are the flowers, the knobs, and the goblets. We are going to have plenty more to say about them later. Now, frag the Gemara be'emanami ba'azav ba'konim in a ba'azav in a ba'konim. Well, maybe I'll say that only when the menorah is made of gold do you require the 7 branches, or really the additional 6 branches. Maybe if the menorah is not made of gold, you don't need all of those branches, right? Because it's in the context where it talks about the gold. It also talks about all the branches that stem from the sort of main spine. I don't know, the main candle of the menorah. How pamut mikre? No, that would no longer be a menorah. It would be a candlestick. And we need a candelabra, not just a candlestick. V'zeh ma'aseh menorah miksha zav. So we talked about zav, right? So we said zav, miksha, zav. So that, or zav, miksha. So those were the 2 zavs. A, that only when it's made of gold does it need to be made from a talent of gold. And only when it's made of gold does it need the knobs, flowers, and goblets. Now, moving on to miksha. So v'zeh ma'aseh menorah miksha zav. This is a pasuk from Parshas Ba'aloscha, the book of Numbers. So for the Ma'aseh Menorah Miksha Zav, it's got to be, knocked out of 1 block. Ba'azav, Ba'a Miksha, Ena Ba'azav, Ena Ba'a Miksha. Only when it is made of gold does it need to be from a single block. If it's made of a different metal, so then it can be shtiklach. Miksha de Seifa Lamai also, and what do we do with the it says Miksha there in Parshas Ba'aloscha twice. How come it says Miksha a second time when it says Miksha he? Limute Chatzotzos, to say that only the menorah needs to be pounded out of 1 block. The Chatzotzos, the trumpets on the other end, do not need to be pounded out of 1 block of silver. The Sanya that we learn in the Brayso, Chatzotzos are yuboim min ha'eshes. Min akesef, that the chatzotzos, the trumpets, were made from 1 block, and they were made of silver. Asoy min agrutos, if they were made from shtiklach ksherim, they are nonetheless ksherim. Mishar min matechos psulim, but if they are made from other metals, then they are pasul. Right, so we said that the chatzotzos are made from 1 block and they are made of silver. The 1 block is not a requirement, but the silver is a requirement. Why did we say that the silver is a requirement, that other metals would be pasul? Because it says by the chatzotzos, it says that kesef, and it also says v'havoya. What does it say? The pasuk says, "Asei lecha shtei chatzotzos kesef, miksha ta'aseh osem v'hayu lecha." So it says avoya. So it must be just so. Min agrutos nami miksha ve'avoya. Yeah, but it also says in that same pasuk miksha. So I would think that it would have to be pounded from 1 block. Mi'et rachmana gabe menorah miksha he v'lo chatzotzos. Yes, but by menorah it says miksha he. That menorah needs to be pounded out of 1 block, not the chatzotzos. Okay, givaldik. So what have we learned? We've learned that by the menorah, if it's made from gold, it must be pounded out from 1 block. It can't be from golden shtiklach. It doesn't have to be made of gold, however. It could be made from other metals, and if made from other metals, then it can be constructed of different shtiklach. When it comes to chatzotzos, so it must be made from silver. However, it doesn't need to be made from 1 block. I guess it should be made from 1 block. It says in the pasuk to be made from 1 block, but if it's made from shtiklach, it is nonetheless, from silver shtiklach, it's nonetheless kosher. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol HaKelim, all of the vessels she'asa Moshe, that Moses made, ksherim lo v'ksherim l'doris. They are kosher for him, as well as for future generations. Chatzotzos, however, The exception being the trumpets, the chatzotzos that Moses made. Ksheris lo upsulis ledoros. They are ksheris only for him. They are invalid for other generations. Chatzotzos my time. How come the trumpets are only valid for Moses' generation? If it's because the pasuk says asay lecha, because the pasuk says asay lecha chatzotzos, lecha v'lo ledoros, it's only for you and not for future generations. However, elami atav asisa lecha aron eitz, when the Rabbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, make for yourself an aron of wood, hachinami de lecha v'lo ledoros, does that also mean for you and not for future generations? Chaver, what's this aron eitz? What's this ark of wood? This is not the ark of wood designed by Bezalel ben Ahaliav ben Achisamach. Was it Mata Yehuda? Was that no? I'm sorry. No. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, right? And who is it? Ito Ahaliav ben Achisamach. Right, Lamate Menashe, I think, right? No, this is right. Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur, I think. Who is Hur? Hur, I think, was the son of Miriam and Kaleb. No? Cheva, what do you say? Maybe. Anyways, this was not that Aron. This was not that Aron. The pasuk, this is on the pasuk in Devarim. It says, I'm reading the pasuk. The Rebbeinu Shalom says to me, says Moses, this was after the first tablets were broken, and then now after basically an initial 40 days on the mountain, then the tablets were broken, another 40 days of praying, and now before the final, the third 40-day stint on Har Sinai, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, make new luchos like the first ones, come up to the mountain, and bring with you, I assume it means bring with you, but make for yourself a ark of wood. And as Rashi on the Chumash, I believe Rashi on the Chumash points out, that this what, Moshe Rabbeinu came down from those 40 days on Yom Kippur. And it was only after that they started working on the construction of the Mishkan, during which process the Aron of the Mishkan, and I imagine later the Beis HaMikdash, was constructed. So this was a different Aron. This was the Aron that would go with the Yidden out to war. The Aron that Bezalel designed was to stay in the Mishkan or the Beis HaMikdash. The one exception was during the time of Eli, when that Aron was taken with them, and unfortunately we know it was captured by the Philistines. So anyways, this is the Aron that Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about. So the Gemara is talking about the Aron that would go out to war with them, that had, I believe, the broken tablets in it. Now, is it so? It says Asay lecha, Vasisa lecha Aron eitz hachinami de lecha v'lo ledoros. Does that mean that the Aron was only for Moses' generation, but not future generations? No, that's not the case. Ela, rather, when it says lecha, ilaman de Omar lecha mishelcha, one way to understand lecha is that you fund it yourself, pay for it yourself. Ilaman de Omar kabiyachol b'shelcha nirotze yosem shelaim. Alternatively, it could mean that the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, look, this is communal. The chatzotzos are for let's say the Aron, it's for the community. So it comes from communal funds, but I would have been very happy for it to have come just from you. Okay, whatever it is, but it doesn't mean only for your generation. Right? Again, either it's a machlokes in Masechta Yoma. What exactly does lecha mean? And either it means from your own funds, or it means I would have been very happy even if it was it came directly from you. But anyways, Hanami Baile Lachi, and that's also how to explain the lecha when it comes to the chatzotzos. It is not to be explained as only for your generation. Okay, so then how do we know that the chatzotzos were only for Moshe's generation? Shiny awesome, it's different by the chatzotzos, the Amar Kol Lecha, Lecha Trezimne, Asei Lecha, V'ayu Lecha. The answer is that when it comes to the chatzotzos, it says twice by the chatzotzes, yours. I say lecha shtei chatzotzes kesef mikra ta'aseh osam vayu lecha lemikra eda v'lemasa machnos, only for your generation, not for future generations. Tanu Rav Papa Breder Rav Chanan Kamid Rav Yosef. Rav Papa Breder Rav Chanan taught before Rav Yosef Menorah Haisa Ba Mina Eshes. He said he taught so Rav Papa Breder Rav Chanan taught a brisa before Rav Yosef, and that brisa said Menorah Haisa Ba Mina Eshes, that the menorah came from one block, Min Azov, from gold. Asar shel kesef kshera. Now, if the menorah is made from silver, that's fine. It's kosher. Shel ba'atz, but of tin, v'shel aver, or of lead, v'shel gisteron, or from some kind of metal, some kind of concoction of metal, some kind of other metal. Rebbe says that that's not okay. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda machshir shel eitz machshir, period. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that it is kosher. Okay, so everyone agrees that the menorah can be made of gold or silver. When it comes to tin, lead, and other assorted metals, Rebbe says pasul, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says kosher, and they also agree shel eitz v'shel etzem v'shel zchuchis, that a menorah made out of wood, out of bone, or out of glass, divrei kol psula, everyone agrees that that is pasul. So they agree on the wood, on the bone, and on the glass that it's pasul, on the gold, on the silver that it's kosher, and they disagree about the tin, the lead, and the other metals. Amrle my daitra. Now, Rav Yosef heard this brisa being taught by Rav Papa Bar Chanan, by Rav Papa Breder of Chanan, and he was perplexed. He was perplexed because he was hearing that Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that you can't make the menorah out of wood. And also that Rebbe was saying that you can't make the menorah out of lead and tin. And he was perplexed because as far as Rav Yosef was aware, Rebbe says that you can make the menorah out of any kind of metal. And that Reb Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says that you can even have a menorah from holtz. You can have a menorah made out of wood. So he says, Rav Yosef says, "My daitra." No, tell me more. Can you explain to me your brisa, Amarle? So Rav Papa Brei, Rav Chanan says, "No problem. I will explain to you. I can explain to you the machlok is between Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rebbe. Bein Mar uvein Mar klali ufrat edarshe. Both Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda are learning klal ufrat uchlal. Okay, but we'll get into the details of this klal ufrat uchlal soon. Now, of course, we've learned a few times about the klal ufrat uchlals, that be'etzem what the result ends up being, without getting into the details right now, maybe we'll get into details in a few minutes, but what the result of a klal ufrat uklal is that we basically have a general rule, a specific rule, and a general rule again, and the result is that we're going to include things similar to the prat. So the prat here is zahav, is gold. So we're going to say that the menorah can be made from anything similar to gold. And where Rebbe and Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda disagree is what are we considering to be similar to gold? So miyumar savar ma prat meforish shel mateches afkol shel mateches. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says, well, gold is metal. Therefore, all metal, the menorah can be made out of all metals, including tin, including lead, including assorted metals. Umar savar, whereas Rebbe holds, ma'aprad mefarish davar chashuv, gold is something that is significant, it's important. Afkol davar chashuv, the menorah must be made out of something important to the exclusion of tin, lead, and assorted metals. So Amar le sami didach mikame didi, And Rav Yosef was unimpressed, and he says, let's throw away your brisa and instead go with my brisa that I have. Disanya, that here's my brisa, says Rav Yosef. Klei sharis shason shel eitz, that klei sharis, service utensils in the temple and the Mishkan made of wood, Rebbe posel. Rebbe says you can't make klei sharis of wood. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says kosher. You can make klei sharis out of wood. But my kamiflagi, and what is their machlokes? Rebbe darish klale ufrate, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda darish ribuye umiute. So Rebbe learns klal ufrat, and we're about to get to what this klal ufrat is and this ribuye umiut is, whereas Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda learns ribuy umiut. Now, as we've seen many times in the past, essentially, as we just said a minute ago, the net result of a klal ufrat is that we come to include all things similar to the prat and exclude things that are not similar to the prat. The net result of a ribuy umiut is that we include absolutely everything. The prat is coming to exclude just one thing. Now, Rebbe darish klal ufrate. Rebbe darshans klal ufrat. What's the klal? What's the prat? What's the final klal? Vasisa menorahs. You will make a menorah. Okay, pretty general. Make a menorah. Klal. Zahav ta'or. Specifically of gold. Prat. Miksha teosa menorah. The menorah shall be made by pounding it out of a block. That's pretty general. Once again, what kind of a block? Chazer v'cholal, klal ufaru klal. So we have a klal followed by a prat followed by a klal. Yatadon elikein a prat. The net result is going to be that the menorah can be constructed out of anything similar to gold. Ma prat mefora shel mateches, just like gold is a type of metal, avkol shel mateches, all types of metals. So we see that Rebbe says that all types of metals can be used for the menorah. Well, for klei sharis, right? Well, okay, for klei sharis, based on the fact that menorah, we're using the menorah, which is a klei sharis, as our example. We're learning that by menorah, it says klal ufaru klal, and the prat is gold, which is a type of metal. So Rebbe says that all klei sharis, including the menorah, can be made out of all metals, including tin, including lead, including those assorted metals. So we see that Rebbe says that those are kosher, says Rav Yosef. And continues the brisa, Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda darish ribuye umiute, whereas Rav Yosef Bar Yehuda learns out riboys and miuts. Again, vasisa menorahs riba, okay, make a menorah, okay, pretty general, inclusive, riba. Zav tar, pure gold, mi'et, it's a miut. Miksha teasa menorah, you make the menorah by knocking it out of a block. Chazav riba is another riboy. Riba umi'et v'riba. Riba hakol includes absolutely everything. You can make the menorah out of whatever you want. Umay rabbi kol mile. It includes everything. However, what was the point of saying gold? That's a miut. Umay mi'et, it excludes just one thing. Mi'et shel cheres, it excludes cheres. You can't make klei sharis out of cheres according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda. Adrabah. Okay, so what do we see? So we see a double question on Rav Papa Brei Rav Chanan. On the one hand, he had said that Rebbe says tin, lead, other metals are possible, but we see that Rebbe includes all metals. Additionally, he had said that everybody agrees that wood is out of the question, and yet the Brisa is saying that according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, wood is in the question. The only thing that isn't in the question is earthenware. Adrabah sami didach b'kamei didi, to which Rav Papa says, Ma pitom. Rav Papa Brei Rav Chanan says, I don't know that that's the regular Rav Papa. Also, Rav Papa was a little bit younger. I don't usually assume that he would have been arguing directly with Rav Yosef like this. And it was Rav Papa Breder of Chanan says to Rav Yosef, he says, Ma pitom, I brought a brisa, you brought a brisa. You're saying my brisa is wrong. I'm saying your brisa is wrong. Rav Yosef says, no. You're not going to mess with me when it comes to brises. Of course we know. Rav Yosef was Sinai. We learned that in two places. We learned that Rav Yosef was Sinai at the end of Masechta Brachos, and I believe at the end of Masechta Horis. We said that Rav Yosef is Sinai, that he has great Bekias, and Rabbah was Okra Harim, great Iyun. So Rav Yosef says, nah. You are not going to trip me up when it comes to brises. I'm going to bring you two more brises that prove my point. Brisa number 1, Lo Sagadatich Titania. Brisa number 1, Ein Lo Zav Mevi Af Shel Kesef. If he doesn't have gold to make a menorah, he can even make the menorah out of silver. Shel Nechoshes, or out of copper. Shel Barzel, out of iron. V'Shel Bdil, out of tin. V'Shel Oferis, or out of lead. Interesting that over here we're calling tin, bedil, and lead oferis. Earlier we called tin, like ga'ash or something? Ba'atz. And we called lead aver. Interesting that we're using different words. Anyways, okay, so the Tanakam is saying you can use any of these metals. And Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda machshir af b'shel eitz. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says you can even make a menorah from holz. You can make a wooden menorah. So there is another brisa where Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda is saying that you can make a menorah out of wood, and the Tanakam is saying you can use all metals. V'tani idach, in another brisa, Lo yaisa adam bayis tabnis heichol. A person should not make a house like the heichol. I believe that means with the dimensions of the heichol. Achsadja kneged ulam, or a achsadja is a thing. An achsadja is a thing. I think I almost got it in my head. I don't know. Achsadja is a thing, some kind of architectural thing. Kineged ulam, like the ulam. A pavilion maybe it was called, or I don't know, like the ulam. Chatzor kineged azara, or the chatzor like the azara. Shulchan kineged shulchan, or a table like the table in the temple. Menorah kineged menorah, or a menorah like the menorah. Aval osu shel chamisha v'shel shisha v'shel shmona. You can make a menorah with five, 6, or 8 branches, which is good because we make a menorah with 8 branches on Chanukah, obviously a Chanukiah. Just not of 7. Can make a menorah with 5, 6, or 8 branches, but not with 7. B'shel shiva lo yaise, do not make a menorah with 7 branches. Va'afilu misharmini matechos, even if you're going to use other metals. Even if you're going to use other metals, no menorahs with 7 branches. Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda af shel eitz, and Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda says you also can't make a menorah with 7 branches. Even if it's a menorah from holz, even if it's a wooden menorah, it can't have 7 branches. Lo yaise kiderech she'asu malchei beis Chashmonai, because after all, that is how the Hasmoneans initially built the menorah, right? After the Greeks were forced out by Matisyahu and the Maccabees, after the Greeks were forced out, so the temple was found in a bad state, and the Yidden did not have money to be able to afford a golden menorah, and they initially built it out of wood. Amrulo, they say to Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya, you're bringing a proof from the Maccabees. Shvudim shel barzel are you? The menorah was not made out of wood. Sure, they couldn't afford gold, but they didn't make the menorah out of wood. They made the menorah out of iron rods. V'chipum b'ba'atz, and they covered them, they plated them in tin. Ha'ashiru, when they were able to afford it, asom shel kesef, they then made a menorah of silver. Chazu v'ashiru, once they were able to afford it once again, even more so, asom shel zav, they then made the menorah of gold. So they argue against Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, and they say that the menorah was not made out of wood. Okay, very interesting discussion there. So it seems like Rav Yosef kind of made the stronger argument with more brises to say that according to Rebbe and according to the Chachamim, the menorah can be made out of all metals. According to made out of all metals, according to Rabbi Yosef Bar Yehuda, it can be made out of basically everything except for pottery, except for earthenware. Givaldig. And friends, now is the section of today's daf that is going to prepare us for Parshas Truma. If you pay attention and follow along, well, obviously you're paying attention, but if you follow along with me closely for this next section of the Gemara, for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so, there's a good chance that you will have an easier time and a more pleasant experience with Parshas Truma in 2 weeks from now. It's interesting. It feels like we're at a turning point in the Torah, you know. I feel like we can appreciate it more that we're learning Kodshim now. I feel like the Torah transitions now with Parshas Mishpatim from being like stories of Bereshis through Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, and now it really transitions to the work we've been doing, honestly, for the past while, because Mishpatim is already a lot of Nizikin. There's even some Noshim there. And then we are starting Truma. We're getting into literally what we're doing on today's daf. You know, construction of the Mishkan, Big Day Kahuna, and then we start getting into the Chanukas HaMishkan and Korbanis, Vayikra, Bamidbar. I mean, this is already a lot. We get into a lot of Kodshim and things like that moving forward. It feels like kind of we're transitioning from the stories and into the Lumdus of the Torah now, and we're going to have, I think, a lot more now to do it. It's unbelievable. I think that Zachinu, we have merited through our toil in Limud HaTorah at Babble and Talmud that now, for the rest of our lives, during Kriyas HaTorah, for the half or so of the Torah, which is all about Korbanis, we're gonna know what's up. We're gonna feel like we're insiders here when we're learning, Tazria and Metzorah and Achrei Mos HaKadosh, whatever, all these parshias, Vayikra, Tzav, Shemini. We're gonna be insiders. We won't just be like listening to Kriyas Torah, be like, oh yeah, it's like Korbanis. We'll be like, okay, we know, yeah, it is Korbanis. So Chaver, unbelievable. Omar Shmuel says, Shmuel Mishmei de Sava, in the name of Sava. Okay, it's time for me to pull up this slide. It's basically the same slide as the previous slide, but if you'll notice, this slide now has a lot more numbers. So if you will notice, I think I'll probably I don't even know how I'm going to do this, but I'll probably I'm basically going to be like reading the Gemara alongside the diagram. We're going to keep on, I think, probably jumping back and forth between the Gemara and the diagram. So already immediately what you see, so it's the same diagram as earlier, but now there's a lot of numbers. From 0 all the way at the bottom up to 18 all the way at the top. Now it says, Amar Shmuel Mishmei de Sava, in the name of an elder, although who points us, maybe Rashi points us to Rashi points us to a Tosfos in Chulin, famous Tosfos that says that Ahu Sava could be a reference to Eliyahu Hanavi. Maybe this was Eliyahu Hanavi. Govash HaMenorah Shmona Asar Tfachim, that the height of the menorah was 18 Tfachim. Now again, I don't think that this is not exactly like the menorah described in Parshas Truma, but it's mostly like it. Anyways, Haraglaim va'perach gimel tfachim. So if you see, the first number I have there is 3, because the first 3 tfachim of the menorah is for the legs and for the flower. Now, this menorah I don't think that these would be considered legs. I think that this is a little bit different. We might actually learn about it maybe tomorrow, about maybe this version or something. I'm not sure. Also, I don't see a flower there in the first 3 tfachim. So that's really like the main difference, I would say, between this menorah and I think what's described in Parshas Truma. So yeah, those are the first 3 tfachim. I don't see in this diagram, I think, legs. I think it's like standing on legs. I don't think that would be here. And also, I don't see any flower in the first 3 tfachim. Okay, fine. Utvachayim cholak, and then there's just nothing on the next two tfachim, right? So we see between 3 and 5 there is a gap. V'tefach shabo gvia v'kafter v'ferach, and then between tefach 5 and 6, you have a goblet, which is the white arrow is pointing to, a knob, which the blue arrow is pointing to, and a flower, which the pink arrow is pointing to. That all happens within the tefach between tefach 5 and 6. Utfachaim cholak, once again, another 2 tefachs without anything. So now we are up to 8 tefachim off the ground. V'tefach shabo gvia v'kafter v'ferach. Okay. And now, wait, did I just skip? No, I don't know I think I read the same thing twice. Wait, one second. V'perach gimel tfachim, fine. V'tfachaim cholak, okay. V'tefach shabo gvia v'kafter v'ferach v'tfachaim, okay. V'tfachaim cholak, fine. Now, v'tefach kaftor, okay. Again, we are at tefach number 8. Now, when we get to tefach number 8, there is a knob. Between tefach 8 and 9, there's a 1 tefach tall knob. V'shnei konim yotzim mimenu, echad elach v'echad elach, and there are 2 branches coming out of the knob. One going to the right, one going to the left. V'nimshachim v'olin kineged gova shel menorah, and they go all the way up to the top of the height of the menorah, up to the 18 tefachim. V'tefach cholak, then we have another empty tefach. And then once again, v'tefach kaftor. And then once again, between tefach 10 and 11, there is a knob. And again, v'shnei karnim yotzim mimenu, 2 branches coming out of it. Echad elach v'echad elach, one to the right, one to the left. Nimshachim v'olun kineged gova shel menorah, going all the way up to the 18 amas, 18 tefachim of the menorah. V'tefach cholak, once again, between 11 and 12, there is nothing, and then at tefach 12, there is once again another knob. V'tefach kaftor, v'shnei kodim yotzim mimenu echad elach v'echad elach, and at that knob at tefach 12, there is a branch coming out to the right and sticking out to the left. V'nimshachin v'olin kineged gova shel menorah, going all the way to the top of the 18 tefachim. V'tfachaim cholak, once again another 2 empty tefachim, getting us to 15 tefachim off the ground. Nishtayru sham gimel tefachim, which means that between 15 and 18, there are 3 tefachim left. Shebain gimel gvin, if you look where the top 3 arrows are, so that is pointing to the leftmost branch. If you look closely, you'll see where the white arrow is pointing to, there are 3 goblets, like stacked. It's like there are 3 stacked goblets. Right, gimel gvin, 3 goblets, v'kaftor, and above them a knob. Uferach, and above that a flower, and then on top of that would be the neris. Okay, so that's the architecture of the menorah. And okay, friends, Parshas Truma, when we get up to the menorah, you will be an insider. I wonder if it's going to talk about any of the other Kalim now, but anyways, okay. Now, Vigvin, Lamayin, Domin, what are the goblets similar to? Kamin Kosas Alexandrium, they're like Alexandrian cups. Kaftorin, Lamayin, Domin, what are the knobs like? Kamin Tapuche Achrasium, they're like Achrasian apples. Prachim Lamayin, Domin, what are the flowers like? Kamin Pirche Amudin, they are like flowers that are like designed into like etched, like carved into walls and stuff. Okay. V'nimtzu Gvin Esim Vishnayim, okay, there are 22 goblets, which we'll get to all the numbers in a minute. Kaftorim achad esrei, 11 knobs. Prochim tisha, and 9 flowers. Givim ma'akvin zeh, you need all 22 goblets. Kaftorim ma'akvin zeh, you need all 11 knobs. Prochim ma'akvin zeh, you need all 9 flowers. Givim kaftorim u'prochim ma'akvin zeh, and you need the givim as well as the kaftorim as well as the prochim. You need them all. I understand how we get to 22 goblets. The pasuk says, "Menorah arba gavim, uchsev shlosha gavim shukadim b'konei ha'echad." Kafta v'ferech v'gomer arba didei v'tamnei srei dikonim ha'esim v'tartin kaftor ha'esim v'tartin. If you look right, so each I'm looking back at the slides now. So now, each of the 6 branches, forget about the main branch in the middle, but each of the 6 branches, they each have, or we're talking about the goblets, right? So each one has 3 goblets on it. So 3 times 6 is 18. And then the main branch has also 3 goblets, which is 21. And then there is a goblet where the white arrow is pointing, the white arrow all the way on the bottom is pointing to another goblet. So that's 22 goblets. Okay. Kaftorin nami, also the knobs. Achad oser, kaftorin. There are 11 knobs. Trei dida, 2 for it. Okay. Vishisha dekonim, and 6 of the branches, so that's 8. V'kafter, and another 3. Al-chatzar, that is 11, right? What are the branches? What are the knobs? Well, honestly, actually, you could just look at the arrows, right? If we start from the blue arrows are the knobs. So if we start from the bottom, I think that's easiest. So there's 1 knob at the bottom, and then there's another 3 blue arrows, 3 knobs where the branches come out of. Okay, so that's 4 knobs. And then where the top blue arrow is, it's basically pointing to the knob on each of the 7 branches, right? This time we're including the main one. So basically, at the top there, you got 7 knobs. And then you can count another 4 knobs. Look, count the blue arrows going down. 7 and 4 is 11. Okay. As we actually pointed out, we couldn't actually find a flower at the bottom there. So if you look at the flowers, actually, if you count the flowers, if you look at the pink arrow all the way at the top, so that's pointing to 7 flowers. And then there's another pink arrow pointing to a flower lower down, but that's only 8. Where's the 9th one? Right, where do we get to 9 flowers? Prochim trei dida, right? On the main branch, there are 2 flowers, right? 1 all the way at the top and 1 by the pink arrow pointing below. Vishisha dekonim, and then the remaining 6 branches also each have a flower, so 2 and 6 is 8. Tmanya, that's only 8. Amr of Shalman, ksiv, ad yirecha ad pircha mikshahi. It says down to the bottom of it, mikshahi. Apparently, there is also another flower all the way at the bottom. I don't know why it's not included in this menorah. I don't know, maybe this is like a menorah for like the Beis HaMikdash or something. Maybe it's different. I don't know, maybe we'd have to look in Yechezkel or something, see if they talk about it. Anyways, but apparently down at the bottom, there's also supposed to be a flower, which is not in this example, but in the examples in the Chumash, there is that additional flower, that is 9. Friends, well, if you followed along during this last Gemara with the menorah, with the slides, it's going to be relevant pretty soon in Parshas HaShavua. Friends, that was Daf Chof Ches, Daf 28 of Masechta Menachos. On Daf 28 of Masechta Menachos, we wrapped up a little bit of leftovers from yesterday, sprinkling the metzorah oil, not lishmah, which is a little bit of a pun, the leftovers from yesterday, because we talked about the shiare of the log. But anyway, sprinkling metzorah oil, not lishmah, allows the priests to eat the remaining oil, does not allow the metzorah to reintegrate into society, although we did point out that maybe actually it might not be that extreme. It might possibly be a reference to just being a mechusar kippurim, and he would be unable to eat korbanis until he does it another time properly. Requirements for the construction of the menorah. When the menorah is constructed of gold, so it's got to be from 1 block. There are knobs, there are flowers, there are goblets, and it must be a talent, a kikar, a talent of gold. When not gold, it can be little pieces, no knobs, flowers, and goblets, and does not need to be a kikar. Rabbi Yehuda says it can be even made of wood. And then we discussed the architecture of the menorah, all of the goblets and the knobs and the flowers and the branches and how everything fit in and the heights and everything like that. Friends, that was the Daf Chof Ches of Masechta Menachos. I'll point out also that in the Mishnah, we started referencing the mezuzahs, the tefillin, tzitzis. So I imagine that we can expect within the coming days to be getting into some of those sugyas as well. Friends, that was the Daf Chof Ches of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Cheers.